Hi, I'm Toby from Concrete Lab, and in this latest video we are going to be sanding the cast-in-place tabletop and section of worktop that we cast in the last video. Now, at the end of the last video, once we'd got the concrete completely level, we covered the concrete over. It's now been about 24 hours since we cast the concrete. And as you can see beneath the plastic, there is a lot of moisture which has come out of the concrete, and we put the plastic on there to trap the moisture in to aid the curing process. So in this stage of the project, you are going to need an orbital sander. You are going to need sanding pads, and we generally use 80, 120 and 180 grits. You're going to need a pair of gloves, and we would recommend that you have something like an apron because it is quite a messy process. You are going to produce quite a bit of cement paste, and that's going to spray from the orbital sander. And just make sure either you've got an apron or you've got really scruffy clothes that you don't mind ruining. So let's have a little chat about the kit that we're going to be used that I've just described. We have an orbital sander here. This is very well used, as you can see. Now that would be too fast. We're going to put it on a much lower setting. Nice and slow. We're going to be spraying the top with a squirty water bottle as well. Which means that you won't need any dust extraction, so that's why we've left the hose off in this situation. You're also going to need sanding pads. We use 80, 120 and 180 grit. Now generally what we suggest is that you start off with the highest grit, so the 180, which is the finest of the three, and that means that you're not blitzing your concrete from the very start. You're just going to go very gently. And if you're finding that your concrete is really well cured at this point, then you can drop down through the grits. You probably won't have to. 180 is usually absolutely fine, but just to be prepared, we have the 120 and 80 on hand as well. Gloves, again, very important. Protect your hands. Cement is a caustic substance, and you want to keep your hands away from it as much as possible. Here is the apron that I'm going to use today. It's just going to protect my clothes. Finally, here is the squirty water bottle that we're going to just mist the concrete with as we go. So let's move all these aside and uncover the concrete. So as I'm uncovering it, I'm expecting to see quite a lot of moisture that's built up underneath the plastic sheet, which has taken place. That's really great. I know that overnight this has been curing as much as possible. Right, so I'm going to start by putting my gloves on and put my apron on as well. And now I'm pretty much ready to go. So here's my orbital sander on the lower setting. I'm going to grab a 180 sanding disc. As you can see, this is it's blue in colour. Generally when it's a sanding disc and it's blue, it means it's a wet dry sanding disc. That's what we recommend, wet dry, and also no holes in it. This does have dust extraction in it, this orbital sander. We don't want anything sucking up into the machine, so you go for the discs with no holes. So stick that on using the Velcro. We're going to give the concrete a light mist. And we're going to start sanding. Now, just like every other stage of your project using our concrete, it's not a race. Just go gently, enjoy the process, Use feel and touch to work out where you've sanded and where you haven't. I know over here it feels quite rough. In the centre section, as I'm building up a bit of paste, it's nice and smooth. If you feel that the concrete's getting a bit dry at any point, just give it a squirt. Obviously don't squirt the machine. But it's very simple and you can see results very, very quickly. As you can see, I'm building up a paste instantly, which is great because it means that you're smoothing your concrete. Now the great thing about these gloves is that you can still feel through them. There's enough, they're thin enough so that you know where you sanded and where you haven't. Stop and check your pad every so often to make sure that it's still rough enough to sand the concrete. This one's absolutely fine. Now I should point out at this stage that I've still got the edge forms on. You keep the edge forms on for a reason. It means that you've got a guide to work to. And you're going to have a nice uniform edge when you strip them away. The actual edges that are up against the melamine won't need a lot of sanding, if any, because it's cast against a nice smooth surface. Now once you've gone over the whole top, you can now increase the speed slightly, because you know by now that you're not going to shred the concrete. And this is where it begins to get a little bit messier. Okay, I'm going to go and get a damp cloth and I'm going to wipe the surface off now to get rid of the slurry, and we're going to see where we are. So I've just given the concrete a good wipe off and a bit of a clean, and I'm quite happy with the finish that I've got. It's a very rustic finish, but that is the cast in place process, and when it's finally finished and sealed, I think it's going to look fantastic. So let's move over to the worktop and do the same thing there. So here we are with our worktop section. I've changed the pad, I've got a brand new pad. As you can see, I've stripped the plastic away. It hasn't quite retained the moisture as much as the tabletop, but that doesn't matter because we're going to wet it down now before we start sanding. So I'm starting off with the 180 pad again, so that I'm confident that I'm not going to shred the concrete. I don't think I'm going to, because we left 24 hours between the casting and the processing, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Again, we've got a lovely rustic pattern here, which when it's finally sanded and sealed is going to look fantastic. It particularly lends itself to outdoor kitchens and outdoor furniture, but that's not to say that you couldn't have it in an internal kitchen either. So again, we're going to start off on the lower setting and just go gently. You can see in some of the areas the moisture soaked in straight away, so I'm just going to give that another spritz. And you can see the paste coming up almost instantly. Now, if you remember in the last video, as I took my gloves off, a load of dried concrete sort of landed in this corner here, and it's made for a really nice pattern. Now, this is the reason why you don't really want to leave the concrete any longer than 24 hours, because at this stage, so soon after the casting, the concrete's still soft enough to be able to bring this paste up and smooth off that top layer. If you left it for a week, for example, it would be absolutely bomb-proof, and it would be virtually impossible to take the texture and take the roughness away. Okay, I'm happy now that this is nice and smooth. I'm just going to wet it down and clean it off. And you can see as I pull the squeegee over the top, all the little divots are filling up with the slurry mix. Now this slurry mix is very weak, so we couldn't leave that on. So what we're going to do with this section is we're going to use a little bit of smoothing paste and fill in all those divots. And we're probably going to go for a contrasting colour, a lighter grey, just to give it a little bit more definition. As you can see, it is a messy process, as I've said before, and that's why you want to be wearing your scruffs or an apron, and make sure you've got gloves on. So I'm happy with the concrete at this point. It's smooth, it's got plenty of character to it. We're going to leave it now for another 24 hours and let it cure, and then we're going to put the smoothing paste on. So if you have any questions about the sanding process, please pop them in the comments box below and we'll come back to you straight away. Again, if you like the video, please click the like button, and finally don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to click the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, so every time we upload a photo, then you'll be notified. Okay, bye for now.